Hi, my name is DM Barr. I am an author of sex, suspense, and satire. My psychological thrillers, Expired Listings and Slashing Mona Lisa, are on the market, and my upcoming domestic suspense novel, Saving Grace, will be out at the beginning of October. Today, I am joined by Johnny Shaw, who is a screenwriter, a short story writer, a very successful novelist, as well as a teacher. He is actually in Portugal right now writing out the pandemic, but he took some time out to speak with me. And he's going to give you some tips on how to be successful without the help of an agent, as well as how to adapt your book into a screenplay, or at least what to think about if you're thinking about doing that. And he's going to reveal a few secrets about him and things you may not know that will be interesting to you. So sit back, enjoy, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Johnny Shaw. Johnny Shaw was born and raised in the Calexico-Mexicali border. I hope I got Calexico right. I've been practicing. The setting for his novels, Dove Season, Big Maria, and Plaster City. He has won both the Spotted Owl Award and the Anthony Award. His shorter work has appeared in Plots with Guns, Thuglit, I love that name, Shotgun Honey, Crime Factory, and numerous anthologies. Johnny also acts as the editor-in-chief and is a frequent contributor to the online fiction quarterly Blood and Tacos, a loving homage to the men's adventure paperbacks of the 70s and 80s. He received an MFA from screenwriting from UCLA, and over the course of his writing career, he has seen his screenplays optioned, sold, and produced, so I'm very jealous. As a playwright, his stage collaborations with actor Jamie Ars, is that pronounced correctly?
That's good enough. He won't mind.
Okay. Is it Arze?
Arze.
Arze, sorry about that, Jamie. Arze, Natural Acts and A Good Kind of Crazy have been performed throughout Los Angeles. For the last dozen years, Johnny has taught screenwriting. He has lectured at both Santa Barbara City College and UC Santa Barbara. He is the owner of Johnny's Used Books, formerly a brick and mortar bookstore in Los Angeles, now entirely online. He lives in Portland, Oregon with his wife, Roxanne Petrusnik. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
His latest book, Southland, will be released on August 4th, but the hardcover is currently available for pre-order at bookshop.org, and the ebook is available for pre-order on Amazon. And just as an aside, we have something in common. You were one of the authors of the anthology Trouble and Strife, Crime Stories Inspired by Cockney Rhyming Slang. Came out in 2019, and I have a side character in my book, Slashing Mona Lisa, that constantly speaks in, let's say, CRS. And readers had mixed reviews about that, but I had a blast writing it. So what was your experience with that?
That was, Simon Wood asked me, Trouble and Strife, it was an anthology. He wanted to do a series of short stories where people took Cockney slang terms and incorporated both the slang term and what it meant. So like I think Steve Brewer, did Babbling Brook, which is crook. And I did Dickie Dirt, which is shirt. So there's a name of a character named Dickie Dirt in my story, as well as a shirt kind of plays into the, plot of the short story.
It's such a great idea.
Yeah, and he put together, like Katrina McPherson's in it, Robert Dugoni's in it. There's a lot of really, really talented writers. And each person's take was, like, I didn't write there's no actual slang in my story. My story's set in the California desert. It's, but we're using that as the inspiration. It was a fun challenge, to kind of come up with something.
Very cool. So you're writing out the pandemic in Portugal, of all places. How's that going?
It's Portugal is good. People are very friendly. We arrived here kind of like 5 days before the lockdown, so we haven't seen a lot of Portugal, but we're in Porto, and it's opened up a little bit, and they weathered the storm very well. It came here later, so they saw what happened in Italy and Spain, and so they were very well prepared. And so it hasn't I mean, it's devastating everywhere, but it hasn't hit Portugal nearly as much as the rest of Europe. And they were very, they were on it. So we ended up being in a really, really good place. So.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So you're a big fan of the 70s and 80s men adventure paperbacks. What inspired that?
Well, originally, like Blood, that doesn't exist anymore. That's a slightly old bio, but that's fine. It is. I was the editor of that. I did an anthology and issues of that, and the website's still up. So bloodandtacos.com still exists. All the stories are free. It was a publisher friend of mine, a Canadian publisher, Creative Guy Books, Creative Guy Publishing, Pete Allen in Vancouver. We had been talking about trying to do something together, and I wasn't going to do a book because I was on contract, and so I figured we could do maybe a website or something like that. And it was around the time my first book came out, and I knew nobody within the kind of crime fiction community. This is about 10 years ago. And I was at my very first VoucherCon, which is the crime fiction convention for people that don't know. It's a big crime. And I literally didn't know anybody. And so I kind of showed up, and I'm not shy, so I ended up talking to people. And I was kind of floating this idea around I had about writing. I was going to do it as like a hoax. I was going to write a story and pretend it was real and tell someone, hey, I discovered this old story, and then I was going to do it. And he said, it's like, I would like to write one. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll put something together. And then apparently this was Cameron Ashley, who's an Australian writer and publisher. He told everyone that I was doing it. Like people would come up to me and say, like, they would pitch me stories. And so I actually used it to meet a lot of people, a lot of different writers. Gary Phillips was there was just a lot of really great writers but they would just come up to me and go like, here's my story. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, you're in. And so I was kind of forced to do it, and it was fun. There was a lot of things, and I had to, because it wasn't self-published, and I had Pete, this experienced publisher. We were able to pay authors. We did a phone app with it, like a choose your own adventure. We were able to do some fun stuff, but there was a point, my first job was writing novels, and that it was kind of starting to take a little more time away. And so I said at a certain point, like the joke had been finished. I felt like I might revive it eventually just for fun.
So really, instead of getting a puppy, guys who want to meet women should just say they're writing an anthology.
Absolutely. I don't like, and I didn't put a call out on that either. Because one, I had a bunch of people that already asked, and I wouldn't ask someone to write something so specific. It was really specific what I was asking for that they couldn't really place somewhere else. And so if I didn't like it, I would, I would feel bad for someone doing all that work.
Sure.
So it was a very kind of small operation. And there seems like there's still good anthologies coming. I don't write a lot of short stories because I didn't start that way.
What other genres or authors inspired you?
I started out, because I started as a screenwriter, so I'm as influenced by film as I am. That my dad was a big reader as well, and particularly of mysteries. So I grew up in a house full of books, and that. So like some of those early, I didn't really read crime fiction until later. Finding different people that were representing kind of different groups. Like, I remember reading Kem Nunn wrote a book called Tapping the Source, which is a surf noir book, kind of. There's a book called Fat City. It's not a crime novel. That's about boxing in Stockton. That to me is perfect. And but I was also a humorist first. I was a comedy writer, and I wrote a lot of humor. And so Robert Benchley, who was like the Dorothy Parker, Algonquin Circle era in New York, Robert Benchley was someone I read. Just like as much of Laurel and Hardy that I watched, I read a lot of Robert Benchley. Those are huge authors. And Patricia Highsmith as well.
Okay. And we'll get to her in a second, because I did read something you said in a former interview about her. So you started out as a screenwriter, and how is that different from writing fiction? Or writing fiction novels, because screenplays are fiction.
Yeah. It was an interesting path because it wasn't the obvious path. When I wrote my first novel, I don't think I had written a short story since junior high. Like, I didn't go from writing short stuff. So I was always kind of in this longer form, which had plot and subplot. And so when I didn't even tell anyone, I didn't even tell my wife I was writing a novel until I was like 150 pages into it, because I didn't know if I would finish it.
Right.
So she knew I would go and write every day. She never really was that curious about what it was. So when I could play to my strengths, like I knew how to plot a story. I'd done that. I knew character and dialogue. But like prose style and description aren't really a part of screenwriting. You're not really drawing the reader in the same way. The descriptions are very spare. So when I approached writing a novel, I knew that there were these elements that weren't there, and like I could play to my strengths. And so the two things that I knew I needed to work on, which was description and drawing a reader into the space. In my first novel, Dove Season, every location is a real place, because that way I could just as if I were telling you a story orally, I can describe a place that I see in my mind's eye a lot clearer than if I'm trying to make up a location. And I also wrote it in first person, which was, to me, closer to dialogue. It was more informal or more familiar from the main character. The main character's voice is not a far cry from my own. For that same reason. I wasn't stretching. And it's like the book is set essentially in the house I grew up in. Like, it was really, and because it's a border story, it's all set on the border. So it took a while to realize that where you grew up is kind of a little more exotic to other people than it was just your normal. It was actually fairly an interesting place once you put a little distance between yourself and the place.
Sure, and we're going to touch on that location also, but do you still write screenplays?
I do occasionally. I haven't written like a spec screenplay in a while, like in a long time, but I do get hired occasionally. And I've adapted some of my books. Some of my books have been optioned in the past. Some are under option right now, I believe. And I've done adaptations of my own stuff, which I don't recommend doing. Like, you've kind of already written that story, it wasn't, so you're using your craft, but not that much. And I still teach screenwriting. I still teach a lot of, I rarely teach fiction, but that's just because I teach in the university systems, and my academic background's in film. Nobody's really wants me to teach fiction, even though that's what my, bibliography would suggest. So,
what are, since you did mention it, what are a few tips you can offer to authors who think that their novels might make a good screenplay?
That's a really good question. They would have to be honest with themselves about what a movie is. When I adapted Dove Season, I adapted it into a feature screenplay at one point. If I had done it for if every scene was in the movie, it would have been a 5-hour movie. A novel isn't really that great. It's an interesting challenge to bring something that big. Novellas, really long short stories, work really, really good. But novels are complex to break down. You have to combine characters. You have to cut out whole plot lines and storylines. But film is, to me, scene driven. Like, a good movie is often a movie that has 3 great scenes. Like, the story has to hold together, but you kind of walk away remembering big scenes in movies. And you'd want to look at your book, see if it has those big scenes. And I don't want to say it needs more. That'd be to say it needs more originality. There's a little more straight genre in fiction than in movies, like particularly like detective, maybe procedural to a little degree. Those would work better in television. They've been kind of more made. You don't see like a detective, like the Maltese Falcon kind of movie as a movie anymore. You see it as Elementary or Psych or what, you know, you see it as Columbo murder show. Television kind of took that over as the investigative thing. So maybe it would be just more kind of know whether it's TV or film, because I think some stuff adapts better. A novel adapts better to TV, you know, because you can put the whole thing in it.
It's interesting. 1 second, I'm just going to switch gallery view. You write short stories as well. Is there anything new out in the world right now that we should know about?
In a rare, usually I write about one short story a year, but because I've been traveling a lot and where I was with my book, I had all these pauses. I kept writing short stories. And so Trouble and Strife from Simon Wood. I have my story Dickie Dirt is in there, which is the Cockney rhyming slang. There's a book called Both Sides, which was edited by Gabino Iglesias, that is Border Noir. I think it's not just Mexican border, but it's all border stories. Yeah. Story in there called Fundido that I like. There's a Shotgun Honey, which is a website that publishes every week. It has flash fiction, 700 words or less, I believe, is the limit. It's been a great site. It's been supportive of a lot of people, and they were putting their 4th anthology together. The anthologies aren't flash. It's an opportunity to write longer stories for them. So I think the stories are more like 3,000 words. I have a story in that, and that's Ron Earl Phillips edited it. And I've read some of it, and it's fantastic. It's very, because that's a non-themed anthology. It's just general crime, and it's just fun stuff. It's just because it's so varied in terms of the voices. And then coming out in June, there's an anthology called Lockdown, which was Steve Wedla and Nick Kolakowski got together with Polis Books, and they pitched this to me in like April, and it's coming out in June. They got a hold of a bunch of people to see if they wanted to write stories about being quarantined and see what people came up with. And our deadline was like 2 weeks later. But from what I'm hearing, the stories are fantastic. Like there's a lot of horror writers as well as crime writers in a number of genres. I mean, my first reaction was, does anyone really want to read about being like?
Yeah, I was actually moderating a panel for Sisters in Crime that Nick was on, and a couple of other people from Shotgun Honey were on, and I was asking them, do people really want to read about this? And they apparently think they do. So I think that it'll be really interesting. I mean, they said you just have to take different takes on it, and I think what will be interesting is the different takes that they do write about.
And there are a whole bunch of my friends that were like watching the movie Contagion and Outbreak, and I was like, why would you do that? I don't get why you do that. But so my story in that is funny. Like I decided to see if I could write anything funny because I thought that was an interesting challenge, and I just felt like it was good. I was like, my brain was so focused. I was like, is this just going to be like 30 versions of Rear Window? Like, is it going to just be like people watching? But I think people are way more imaginative than I am. So yeah, it was. I'm looking forward to that because that one's one I haven't read the other stories in. And so, but I know both both Nick and Steve they're going to pick great stuff.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so those are, so on a rare, I have 4 stories out in a 6-month period. And trust me, it won't be anything for like 2 years now. Like, just got it all out of the way.
So you're not using the pandemic to write, or are you writing now?
Yeah, I'm writing a new book. I mean, I'm always have a novel on, that I work on. It's been, I think probably for it's been a little challenging. It's harder to concentrate. I'm not my day didn't actually change that much. To be honest, I'd been teaching online courses and writing, and so I used to write in cafes more. So I had to write at home.
Yeah.
Or home here. Home is where the heart is. But it didn't change that much, but concentrating and stuff was a little harder. I was doing edits on the book that I had coming out in August, so I had other like things like that to do as well. So now I'm back to writing the new one.
Yeah, well, that's
So,
great. I wish I could get down to writing.
I mean,
But
you feel like you were able to like?
no, I've been editing a book that I have coming out in October, but I got to tell you, I had two books planned. One was set in a nursing home, and the other was set on a cruise ship, and they were romances, which I never write, but I had to scrap those.
You can't, maybe you just make them horror stories.
Yeah.
Like,
No. I'm going to start writing comedy because I do throw a lot of humor in.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a good time for it. I think it's.
people
I
want
think
to laugh.
approach it. Yeah, like my first 6 books are funny, not necessarily comedies, but they're some more than others. But there's a lot of humor in all of them. And yeah, I think like I went away from that, and the new book is serious or more serious. And I'm glad I did that. But there was a point, like I feel like, yeah, I think people do need to laugh, and if you have the ability to do that, why not? Do that little bit to make someone laugh.
It's
So
interesting you bring that up because I did have that as a later question, and that is that my first book was a combination of humor and mystery and kink, and it was difficult to sell. And I spoke to people like Harlan Coben and Linwood Barclay and said, you started out funny and then you went more serious, and why is that? And they said, because funny doesn't sell. But I don't think that's been your experience.
funny. Well, trust me, I'm not the guy to talk to about like how to be successful in publishing, because everything I've done either the wrong way or my own way. Not that I'm like some major iconoclast, but I've kind of lucked my way through this as a career. I think I don't think humor doesn't sell. It doesn't sell like Harlan Coben sells. But humor seems to have a ceiling. Like there are people that just, if someone doesn't find me funny, they're going to hate my funny book. Like they're just going to hate it. So, and there's some people, particularly in the crime, they'll never read a funny crime novel. They just think that sense of fun is somehow frivolous to them. They'll read the same kind of, procedural genre book over and over and over again, but like funny somehow they won't do. It's the same right between people that won't read cozies or look down at cozies, and there's all sorts of, and it's everyone has their reading taste, but yeah, I think humor is a challenge. If you make someone laugh with words on a page, you have a reader for life. You have so I have readers that they'll just buy what I work hard to make sure I don't disappoint them, but they'll buy what I do because I made them laugh 3 books ago, so.
Yeah, that's what attracts me to your books. I mean, I'm planning to download them and read them. It attracts me to people like Tim Hallinan. It attracts me to Marshall Karp. And that's why I said to Linwood Barclay, but I loved what I think is One Bad Move. Why aren't you writing funny anymore?
Carl Hyacin was able to do it. They're kind of, Tim Dorsey does it to some degree. I mean, with their selling more books. Something about Florida, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Florida has that secret.
Maybe it's Florida.
But I think there are there's some Elmore Leonard that's pretty funny. I mean, time, like, particularly the later books that were more commercially successful, like
Get Shorty
and something like that. That I think there is a way. Maybe it's like usually that kind of success is much more about marketing than the book. It's much more about publishing is an incredibly risk averse business. They'll tell you they want original work, but original like something they've seen a bunch of times. I don't know if they know what original actually means, and sometimes that like so.
That's a great segue to my next question, which was, in 20 years as a professional screenwriter and novelist, you've never had an agent. And I understand many agents don't like changes in tone. They don't like when you mesh humor with things. Do you think that there is sometimes a disconnect between what readers want and what agents think they want?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. An agent, like, and for the record, a lot of people think that I don't, like, when they find that out, that I don't want an agent or I don't like agents. I think I recommend to my students to look for an agent. I think they can be a valuable partner in the business. And usually between book, I tend to write books not on contract. I prefer to finish a book. I don't even like to sell partials. Like, I like to finish a book, know what it is, because I just don't want anyone telling me what to do, and then try to sell it. And I've been shockingly fairly successful at doing that. But between when I get that new manuscript, I always send it out to agents, and I have the advantage of most people actually take a look at it. Like, I have a little bit of access because I have form. I have sales or reviews or awards or something that'll someone at least maybe put me a little higher in the stack. So I have a little bit of that, but yeah, they always just pass. And so, and I mean, I'm looking probably for a higher tier of agent, because there's, as a lot of, even when some of them said they didn't know what they could do that I can't do myself. I've obviously been doing this for a while by myself, so I painted myself in a little bit of a corner, because I would like more, because I have foreign sales, I have film sales, I have, I've actually done that stuff too, but I could do better with a little bit, with an agent. So
You've had some great publishers. I mean, now you're coming out with Agora, which is an imprint of Paulus. How are you? You're just pitching them, and they know you because of your name.
yeah, well, yeah, it's always luck. It's always with my first publisher was Amazon Publishing, when they were first starting, like Thomas and Mercer. They weren't even called Thomas and Mercer at that time. This was 2010, I think. Like, they had published 6 or 7, but maybe 10 books. And I had been a part of a contest. Amazon used to have a contest called the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award. And I didn't win, but I was a finalist. And part of being a finalist is you went to Seattle and you did a little reading, and there was a little award thing. But I lost, and then I went home. And like a month later, I got a hold of one of the guys there just to tell him, like, thank him or whatever. And he asked me, did a publisher pick it up? Because I think Penguin had some sort of anyway, there was something. And I said, no, Penguin and I we couldn't agree on something. And they was like, hey, Amazon has this new publishing company. And a bunch of those people because at that time, I think they had 6 employees within Amazon. It was very new. They had all seen my reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a pretty good reputation as a reader, that my stuff is big and it plays to an audience. So they remembered it. They asked for the manuscript, and they made me an offer. And then that was about developing a relationship there. Like, I did 6 books. The first 6 books were all with them. And it was interesting to see them grow and to see that, to see what it was. And now so they didn't do the new book isn't with them. And so when we parted ways on that book, I still have a good relationship with them. It was just, this wasn't the book for them. Their catalog has become a little more narrow, and they do a lot more straight thriller and stuff like that. It was very, very broad, weird catalog early on, because they were kind of trying to find their voice as a publisher, I think.
Yeah.
And I fit into a niche there. I kind of fit in a niche everywhere, because my work isn't a lot like other people's. So yeah, then I was shopping it around to, again, agents. That didn't work. And then a few small publishers. Again, I have kind of access that other people don't. And I forget if Chantel got a hold of me or I got a hold of Chantel. I think she might have got a hold of me, because I wouldn't have assumed that Agora would have been a good fit. That in the sense that I know Chantel and I've known her a long time, but it's essentially a diversity driven. And I don't know how they particularly define themselves. Diversity is a big part of the publishing imprint that Chantal was putting together. I'm practically see-through. I'm so white. Like but I was writing a story that my story is about unauthorized immigrants in Los Angeles. So I didn't know what their, manifesto or their mission statement was, and so how I fit. And so we talked about that for quite a while. She felt like it still fit because it was about the subject matter of the book. And so, yeah, I had to read it, and then we were able to come to kind of an agreement. They've been big supporters and big fans of the book. Even through the, recently American Dirt came out, and there was a bit of a controversy with that.
Yeah.
That did not go unnoticed from me. And it's something that needs to be addressed because I'm a supporter of own voices and stuff, but I had a story in my head. I felt like I had the skills to pull it off. I wouldn't have put it into the world unless I thought I pulled off the story, and I did it sensitively. I had sensitivity readers. I've had people look at it. Like we tried to get everything right. Even with my first book, I fell into kind of this uncanny valley of I wanted to write about the border, and I didn't know if I was going to write. If I wrote a Hispanic character, I didn't know if that would work. And if I wrote like a white savior, I didn't know if that was going to work. And so I had to find this kind of middle ground. So I kind of write about a white screw up, which was much closer to what I understood as my own experience, and I could still approach the border. Whereas every character is, Latin. So every other character, most of the other characters. So no, I've written a lot about the border in Mexico, and I treat it with a certain amount of fear and respect because it's very delicate to do right.
Yeah.
But I also have the opportunity to do it right because I feel like, not just because I've developed skills as a writer, but because I have a unique experience that I think is worth exploring. So
that ties into two other questions. One is, and I know that this whole diversity is a huge hot button right now, especially with American Dirt and people wanting to publish, and they're thinking, who am I? You have to write a certain character, and like you said, who am I to write it? So you went a smart way, I think. How important is that research? How do you approach the research to get into those people's minds and to write authentically?
Right. I have a love-hate relationship with research, or I think every writer does. Like, if it's certain like subjects, like history or something, and you get all the books on the subject, and you're like, oh, I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun. And then as soon as you start, you're like, oh yeah, I kind of hate doing this. It's all dry and whatever. My research has always been talking to people. Like I don't measure wealth by money because that's not going to work for me. I measure wealth by interesting people, and I've always put interesting people in my life. So I have a lot of access to a varied group of people. I know a lot of criminals. I know a lot of law enforcement. I know people all over the world. Like I was just in Belgrade last year, and because I have this idea for a Serbian story, and I have Serbian friends that could show me around and kind of talk. Like I just end up meeting interesting people, and those become my resource. And so because of my background growing up on the border, because of the number, and just my own experience, even though I never lived, my dad was a farmer, but we didn't have a lot, but we weren't, I saw poverty, but I've never experienced poverty. That I felt like using my own, I guess, just compassion or empathy, or as I would writing any other character, because all my other books have female characters, Latinx characters, that we write a wide range of characters. It takes a little more to make it the main character and to be inside that character's head,
Sure.
but it's the same palette of human emotion. It's still fear and anger and love, and it's still those same things. So if you can, just like an actor, if you can tap into that, you can make that character real, then it's true. I was actually more worried about writing a female main character than I was about the fact that they're Mexican heritage, or even getting Los Angeles right, which I lived in Los Angeles, but most of this is set in Boyle Heights, which was a different neighborhood than where I lived. And so, like, when I was writing it, I almost took it for granted that I was like because it's not like, it's more I don't want to say it's a general immigrant story, but a lot of immigrants could experience the same story. And I knew more Mexican immigrants than I knew of from other countries. So that's why I did that, because I felt like I get closer to it.
Mm-hmm. But so many of your books are set in California, most of them anyway. What's it about California that lends itself to crime fiction?
I think California is I think there are a lot of books set in California. I think it's still very, very untapped, because 90% of those books are set in LA. And I just added to that. So like but it's a gigantic state. But even those 90% of books set in LA all feel like they're in the same part of LA. They're all on the west side, or only recently, Ivy Pachota has a book out now called These Women, and that's set in kind of the South, like West Adams. And Steph Cha has a book called Your House Will Pay, which it's about a book about kind of after the riots, or the repercussions of the riots, that's set in kind of South Central. And like there's all sorts of stories, even in LA, that I don't feel are being told, and it's exciting to see those being told. I would tell people that I was from California, and they didn't know there were farms in California. They didn't, like, my dad was a sugar beet farmer.
Really? Wow.
So I grew up in the California desert on the border, like right near Yuma, Arizona. That was the big city that we would go shopping in. But we were on the California part. And then going through, like, I'm writing a piece for Crime Reads that's about books set in other parts of California, in Fresno and Bakersfield and Santa Barbara. San Francisco as well, obviously, another one that's well represented. But there's like Barstow. There's just like really great locations that are completely untapped, and there's plenty of good crime in 29 Palms or Desert Hot Springs, Palm Springs. There's so much more, because it's such a big, varied state. And because, not a lot of people write about farming. My first book has a lot about farming that probably it's not the most exciting part. It feels like it's like I travel a lot. And when you fly, it's like city, and then farm, city. And then it's like the whole world is mostly farms.
Yeah.
There seems to be, it's something you can write about, like that I think there's just still so much untapped, interesting stories. And I think that's one of the reasons the diversity presses and pushing more own voice as authors is because they're just stories that haven't been told. And that's a lot of the stories that you get, particularly in genre work and crime fiction. It's like, I've read this story before, or at least understand the shape of the story.
So the new one's in LA.
Yes.
And as you're saying, a lot of books are set in LA, and a lot of books are coming out about undocumented workers. So let's talk a little bit about Southland, and how did you make it different and stand out?
Well, that's good. There was I'll tell you the origin of how I had the idea for this story, and I felt like the easy approach to a story about unauthorized immigrants would be to have them be a side character. It'd be like the Grisham way to do it, that there's a white lawyer that gets the case to protect the unauthorized. I don't want to diss John Grisham, but like I can almost see that book in my head, that would be the approach. You like someone that wants to say something about immigration, but they don't want to write it about the primary source. And all my books are working class. I've always written about the working class. It's something I understand. It's where I come from, rurally. And so in a sense, working class books are not only social novels, they're also about underdogs. And at the time, I had touched on immigration and things in the past in my other books, but I never hit it really directly. I was using, like, a lot of my books are about much more like human exploitation or smuggling, things like that. The border more directly. And so this was writing about someone that, not about their journey over, but about their life as an immigrant in a place and the difficulty of that. And if a serious crime happens to, in this case, the main character Luz, her teenage son goes missing, her unwillingness to go to the police, and it created this, just from a story point of view, it created an underdog and someone with not a lot, like, I'm not a Jack Reacher guy. I don't like characters with a lot of skills. I like characters that are David, Goliath, you want them, so the fact that she can't afford a cell phone or doesn't have a car in LA, and those kind of elements was intriguing just from a plot and story point of view. But there was also, I felt, a lot to say. I think I don't know exactly what sets it off, other than I think it works. And I think the characters are really living, breathing characters that I think it doesn't play. It's not a genre book in the true sense. Like, it doesn't, it's not going to hit the marks that people are going to expect from it. I think it's going to surprise people. Definitely people that read my other books won't see it coming. So I flexed my muscles a little with it. Like, I learned some things in the last 6 books, and I'd like to think that it was worth it to write this book before I go back to my goofiness of what I write.
So I'm going to pick up on Goofy. You were the Grand Marshal of the Carrot Festival Parade, and I'd like to hear more about that. Are you a big advocate of carrots, or does it go deeper?
The Imperial Valley, where I grew up, is a group of small towns. So I grew up between Calexico, which is right on the border, and a town called Holtville. And I went to high school actually in Holtville, which was about we were about 6-7 miles outside of town. But we always saw ourselves as Holtville residents, even though we were just what would be referred to as farm kids. And so Holtville is the carrot capital of the world. So
now you've learned something, everyone out there.
In the United States, if you get, it used to be, I don't know if you still do this, but there used to be bagged carrots called Bunny Love carrots. And there's a very distinct, it would be like when you got a bag of carrots, it would be this one, and that was Mike Urosic. And I felt like he supplied the world with carrots, because you'd see that everywhere. And so, yeah, they grow a lot of carrots down there. That's just the thing. There's a lot of, capital. There's the artichoke capital, and Gilroy is the garlic capital, and there's the lettuce. Salinas is the lettuce capital. California has tons of capitals. I don't think anyone checks. I don't think it's like a kind of records kind of situation. I think that someone declares themselves, and then they have to fight it out with other cities. So it's been the carrot capital for, almost 100 years, I think, or 75 years or something. They've done this. So there's a festival and a parade and a big barbecue and a tractor pull. Anyone from the city won't know what a tractor pull is, but you should all, it's basically tug of war. It's great. And so, yeah, I got asked, this is, I think 3 years ago, because my books were like, I think 4 of my books are set in the Imperial Valley. That one book is called the Imperial Valley, and I represent, they've been embraced a lot by the people down there, and which means a lot, because it was really important to me to get it right, to kind of get it right, warts and all. It's not a pretty picture. It's a kind of dirty desert town. It wasn't it's a great place to live, but it was also a hard place to live. It's 120 degrees in the summer there. It's terrible,
Yeah.
terrible. Um, so so they asked me to do it, and I had to say yes. I mean, I had to say yes. And so, I mean, it's just in a car going like this. Although I got to be a judge for the carrot recipe contest, which was, I felt an honor that I realized when I arrived that it was serious. Like I wasn't like I was, there's part of me was like, oh, I'm going to be the judge of the carrot recipe contest. I walked in there and I was like, I'm not going to play around with this. I know these are all my friends' moms competing against each other and
Wow. Yeah.
goofing off. They're going to hit me in the back of the head. It was fun to go down there. I would go down there regularly. My dad passed away in the 90s, but like I still have cousins and aunts and uncles. I still have a lot of family down there. I actually, until like recently, until this year, my high school buddies and I would get together every year for the last 30 years. Just for the summer, we'd get and hang out. So I kept ties to everybody. And when I write, that's where I go. Like some of those guys are Border Patrol. Some of those guys are, you know, that like I use them and I talk to them, and I get good stories from them.
Yeah.
So I've always kept good ties to it. It was fun. It was like it was an. I mean, all my friends think it's the goofiest thing because it's the Carrot Festival. But
I love it. And you also said in an old interview that if you were going to have to be a fictional character, you'd like to be Tom Ripley. You want to explain why, and let me know if you think if Tom Ripley was real, would he have a political future right now?
Yeah, that's the second part first. 100%. He would be that he was born for that, particularly in the modern era. He would just become whatever he needed to be.
Yeah.
Did I say I wanted to be him?
I think they asked you if you had to be any particular character, who would you want to be?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, it's like I said that because it's so not me. Like I like that I picked kind of a psychopath, like, or a sociopath. I do like that it wasn't Jack Reacher or something like that. Like I didn't want to be like the tough guy. I wanted to be the, you know, cunning, shrewd, deceptive sly guy, you know, so I'll take that. I'm not sure if I would have answered this. I don't know how I would answer that same question. I feel like Tom Ripley's, you know, like by the second book, he's got like a place in France and he's growing orchids and he's collecting art. I think maybe that's the appeal. Like
Yeah, he's living a good life.
His French wife, and he's got money and he's got really no concerns. And then if someone threatens it, he just throws him in the river and moves on.
Nobody gets in your way. I got one last question, and it is the laziest question that someone can ask. And if there are three things that people don't know about you that you'd like to share?
Wow, three things that people. I'm such an open book. Oh, I wish I would have thought of this. Three things that people don't know about me.
That would surprise people to know. I mean, maybe they didn't know you grew up with a father as a beet farmer. So
yeah,
that could be one.
Let's see. I used to play the trombone.
Okay.
When I was a kid. That's a good one. As a hobby, to clear my head, to this day, I used to do it professionally. I design crossword puzzles.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I did it when like 20 years ago. Ooh, maybe 30 years ago. 20, let's say 25. Let's split the difference. I did it as a job, like when I decided I was going to be a freelance, and that's when I still used graph paper. Now I have like a fancy program, but like you used graph paper and you made them. And yeah, I did it. I used to do them for like tabloids and, you know, whatever that but they were the proper ones. They weren't like, they were like symmetrical and pretty. And so I do just for my own amusement and my own, to keep my brain kind of occupied. I do both American and British
Wow.
cryptic crosswords for my own amusement. So that's, not a lot of people know that. And let's see, I don't know, what's the third thing? The thing that's most surprising to most people is I don't drink that much. because all my characters are really drinky.
Yeah.
Like beer drinking rednecks. So I'll go with that. Just for,
All right. You know what? These are all very interesting things that we've learned about you. I want to thank you for spending so much time for me today. I want to remind everybody to find the Southland and to buy it. It's on pre-order. And while you're there, I know that some of your books are available on Kindle Unlimited if people want to sample them.
Yeah, they're all, the first 6 books are all on Kindle Unlimited, Kindle Lending Library, you know, because they're all there.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Best of luck. I hope you get out of Portugal soon, even though it sounds like a lovely place to be sequestered.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best with everything.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a really fun talk.
Yeah, and stay safe.
You too. You too.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Over the river to the city far from home. Toll booth takes my money.